My name is Georgia Wilson, 63 years old, and nothing made me prouder than watching my grandson Tyler graduate as valedictorian last month. We've always shared a special bond, despite the wall my daughter-in-law Melanie has tried to build between us for 18 years. I've swallowed countless insults and exclusions for Tyler's sake, but at his graduation dinner, when Melanie's eyes flashed with contempt and she snarled those words, "You embarrass me, I'm disgusted by you," I was actually ready. I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If you've ever had to stand up to a family bully, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories. You won't believe what happened when that video started playing on the restaurant's TV screens. I never expected to be a young widow. Mark and I were college sweethearts with simple dreams. A modest home, a couple of kids, weekend barbecues. We managed to buy our first little house just before our son James was born. Mark worked construction while I taught at the local elementary school. Life wasn't extravagant, but it was good. Then came that Tuesday in April. James was just 7 years old. The knock on the door. 2 police officers with removed hats. A workplace accident. Scaffolding collapse. Mark was gone before the ambulance arrived. Just like that, our future vanished. The first year after Mark's death passed in a blur of grief and practical concerns. How would I pay the mortgage? Could I afford childcare during summer breaks? Was James getting enough emotional support? I took on evening tutoring jobs and weekend retail work. My mother helped when she could, but she had health problems of her own. There were nights I collapsed into bed too exhausted to even cry. James became my purpose. He was a bright, serious child who processed his father's death by throwing himself into books and schoolwork. By middle school, his teachers were suggesting advanced programs. I scraped together money for science camps and math competitions, often sacrificing my own needs. No new clothes for me meant coding classes for James. Peanut butter sandwiches for my lunch meant proper protein for his growing body. Despite financial struggles, James thrived academically. He graduated high school as salutatorian and earned a partial scholarship to State University. I took out loans to cover the rest, telling him not to worry. "Your job is to study hard and build your future," I'd say. "That's how you can repay me." James decided to pursue law inspired by a constitutional law class in his sophomore year. He was accepted to a prestigious law school across the country. I was simultaneously heartbroken at the distance and bursting with pride. The day I dropped him off at his law school dormitory, I cried the entire 3-hour drive home. Tears of pride mingled with the ache of empty nesting. It was during his second year of law school that James met Melanie Harrington. She came from money, old money. Her father was a senior partner at a top corporate law firm, her mother from a banking family. From the pictures James sent, she was stunning. Sleek dark hair, confident posture, clothes that even I could tell were expensive. When James called to tell me they were dating, his voice contained a note of disbelief, as if he couldn't quite believe his luck. I met Melanie 6 months later when they visited during spring break. She was polite, but reserved, her smile never quite reaching her eyes when she addressed me. She complimented my quaint home in a tone that made it clear she meant small and outdated. When I served the special lasagna I'd made from scratch, James's favorite since childhood, she took 2 small bites before claiming she was watching her carbs. Throughout the visit, she kept steering conversations toward topics that highlighted differences in our backgrounds. European vacations I'd never taken, wines I couldn't afford to recognize, private schools I'd never heard of. James seemed oblivious to these subtle put-downs, or perhaps he chose not to see them. He was clearly smitten, laughing too loudly at Melanie's jokes, eagerly explaining my background as though apologizing for it. "Mom worked so hard after Dad died," he'd say. "She sacrificed everything for me." Each time Melanie would nod with practiced sympathy while her eyes assessed my furniture, my clothes, my life, and found them lacking. They married the summer after James graduated law school. The wedding was held at the Harringtons Country Club, an affair far grander than anything our family had ever experienced. Melanie's father paid for everything, making it clear that my financial contribution wasn't needed or wanted. I wore a blue dress I'd splurged on, wanting to look appropriate for the occasion. During the reception, I overheard Melanie telling a bridesmaid the dress looked department store. I pretended not to hear. James joined his father-in-law's firm after passing the bar. Within 2 years, they announced they were expecting. My grandson Tyler was born on a snowy December morning. The first time I held him looking down at his tiny face with James's nose and chin, I felt a rush of love so intense it nearly brought me to my knees. Initially, my relationship with the new family seemed to improve. Melanie was overwhelmed with new motherhood, and I was one of the few people she trusted to help with the baby. I'd drive to their beautiful suburban home 3 times a week, doing laundry, preparing meals, and giving Melanie a chance to nap or shower. I treasured those quiet afternoons with Tyler, sleeping on my chest, his perfect little fingers curled around my thumb. The trouble began when Tyler was about 9 months old. I suggested a different way to introduce solid foods after Tyler rejected the pureed organic vegetables Melanie had prepared. "Actually, Georgia," she said with a tight smile, "we're following Dr. Ainsley's method. He literally wrote the book on infant nutrition. But thanks for your outdated ideas." Small criticisms multiplied. My clothes might contaminate the baby with outside germs. My perfume was triggering Tyler's sensitivities. When I sang the same lullabies I'd sung to James, Melanie mentioned they were using a specially curated classical music playlist for cognitive development instead. James, now firmly established in his career and new role as father, began to echo Melanie's concerns. "Mom, we're just trying to do what's best for Tyler," he'd explain after Melanie left the room, following a particularly cutting remark. "Parenting has changed a lot since your day." My day. As though my motherhood belonged to some distant primitive past. As Tyler grew from infant to toddler, my role diminished. My regular visits were reduced to once a week, then twice a month. I was no longer trusted to babysit alone. When I brought toys or clothes for Tyler, they would mysteriously disappear before my next visit. Once welcomed advice was now met with eye rolls or outright dismissal. "We've got this handled. Georgia," became Melanie's refrain, always delivered with that same tight smile that never warmed her eyes. By Tyler's 3rd birthday, I was clearly an afterthought in their family structure. At his dinosaur-themed party, I found my name card placed at a table with distant neighbors rather than with family. When I tried to help serve the cake, Melanie smoothly intercepted me. "We hired professionals for that, Georgia. Why don't you just enjoy being a guest, in my own grandson's life?" The real turning point came when Tyler was starting kindergarten. I'd asked repeatedly if I could be there for his first day. James had finally agreed, telling me to meet them at the school. I arrived early, heart fluttering with excitement, and a small gift bag containing a special first day of school book in hand. I waited outside the school entrance for 45 minutes. They never showed. Later, I saw the photos on Melanie's Facebook page. Tyler in his new uniform, standing proudly between his parents at a different entrance. The caption read, "Family milestone today, so proud of our little scholar, family milestone, without his grandmother." When I called that evening, James sounded distracted. "Oh, sorry about that, Mom. Melanie thought it would be too overwhelming for Tyler to have too many people there. You know how kids get anxious on their first day." But the pictures showed Tyler surrounded by Melanie's parents, her sister, and 2 cousins. It was just his maternal grandmother who would have been too overwhelming. I began to realize then that no amount of accommodation on my part would ever be enough. Melanie didn't just find me embarrassing or inconvenient. She wanted me erased from the family picture entirely. And James, my beloved son, for whom I'd sacrificed everything, was allowing it to happen. For Tyler's sake, I continued making efforts. I attended his school performances and sports games, even though I was invariably seated far from the family section. I sent thoughtful birthday and Christmas gifts, though I rarely saw him enjoy them. I called regularly, though phone conversations were always supervised and cut short. Despite these obstacles, Tyler and I maintained a connection. He had his father's kind heart and seemed to instinctively recognize the unfairness of the situation. When he was 7, he made a special Mother's Day card for me, in addition to one for Melanie. "Because you're a mom too, Grandma," he explained with simple wisdom. Melanie's smile froze when he presented it to me, and the card mysteriously vanished from my purse before I left their house that day. As Tyler grew older, Melanie's methods of exclusion became more sophisticated. There were the forgotten invitations to school events, only remembered after they'd passed. The family vacation scheduled during times when I'd specifically mentioned wanting to see Tyler. The way my name was left off group emails about family gatherings until it was too late to adjust the reservations. One Christmas stands out particularly in my memory. Tyler was 9, and the family gathering was at Melanie's parents' expansive home. I'd been invited, a rare occurrence, and had spent weeks selecting and wrapping perfect gifts. Upon arrival, I discovered everyone wearing matching custom Christmas sweaters. Everyone except me. "Oh, Georgia, didn't James tell you about the family sweaters?" Melanie asked, her voice dripping with false concern. "We ordered them months ago. I specifically asked James to let you know." James looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Later, when family photos were taken, I was asked to step aside since I didn't match the aesthetic. Those photos later appeared on holiday cards sent to everyone in their social circle. A perfect family portrait with no visual evidence that Tyler had a paternal grandmother. After years of such treatment, I began to withdraw. Not from Tyler, never from him, but from the constant struggle to be included. I focused instead on building a rich life outside of my role as grandmother. I retired from teaching, but took part-time work at a local bookstore. I joined a walking group and a gardening club. I made new friends who valued my company and didn't make me feel like an embarrassing secret to be hidden away. As Tyler entered his teen years, something unexpected happened. He began reaching out to me independently. At 12, he asked for my phone number, just for himself. At 13, he started texting me about his day, his friends, his interests. By 14, he was occasionally asking if he could visit me after school before heading home. These visits became our special time. Away from his parents' watchful eyes, Tyler relaxed. He talked about his dreams of becoming an engineer, his struggles with certain subjects, his crush on a girl named Allison. I never criticized his parents, never tried to turn him against them. Instead, I listened. I advised when asked. I provided the unconditional love and acceptance that every teenager needs. Melanie predictably was furious when she discovered these unsupervised visits. She called me, voice trembling with barely controlled rage. "You had no right to see Tyler without our permission," she hissed. "We are his parents. We decide who he spends time with." "Tyler is 14, I replied calmly. He reached out to me. "Should I have turned my own grandson away from my door?" "Don't pretend this is innocent," she snapped. "You're trying to undermine our parenting, trying to turn him against us." "I've never spoken a negative word about you or James to Tyler," I said truthfully. "He simply wants a relationship with his grandmother. Is that so threatening to you?" Tyler's visits were subsequently restricted, but our text conversations continued. As he grew into his mid-teens, he became more aware of the dynamics at play. "Why does Mom dislike you so much?" he asked, once his young face troubled. I chose my words carefully. "Sometimes people have complicated feelings that aren't really about the other person at all," I explained. "Your mother and I are very different people with different backgrounds and values. That can be difficult." "It's not fair how they treat you," he insisted with teenage righteousness. "Life isn't always fair, sweetheart, but you don't need to fight my battles. Just know that I love you, and nothing will ever change that." By this time, I had begun documenting Melanie's behavior. Not initially with any plan to use the information, but simply to reassure myself that I wasn't imagining or exaggerating the slights. Text messages where plans were canceled last minute, screenshots of social media posts where family events I hadn't been told about were celebrated, notes about conversations where Melanie had said one thing to my face and another behind my back. The tipping point came at Tyler's 16th birthday party. I'd been invited, another rare occurrence, probably at Tyler's insistence. I arrived with a carefully chosen gift, a high-quality telescope that aligned with his interest in astronomy. As I was placing it on the designated table, I overheard Melanie speaking to her sister in the adjoining room. "Tyler insisted she be invited," Melanie was saying in a low voice. "What could I do? The woman's mentally unstable, you know. Still can't accept that James has his own life now. Calls constantly, demands attention. We have to handle her with kid gloves or she falls apart completely." I stood frozen gift still in hand as Melanie continued painting a picture of me as an emotionally disturbed, clingy mother who couldn't let go. It was so wildly different from reality, from the woman who had rebuilt her life, developed new friendships, and carefully respected boundaries even when they were painful, that for a moment I wondered if we were talking about the same person. That night, I called my friend Barbara, a retired IT specialist who'd become one of my closest confidants. I tearfully recounted what I'd overheard. "This has gone beyond normal in-law tension, Georgia," Barbara said firmly. "She's actively spreading lies about you that could damage your relationship with Tyler and others. You need to protect yourself." With Barbara's help, I began more systematically documenting Melanie's two-faced behavior. Barbara showed me how to archive social media posts, save email chains, and record conversations where legal. We created a detailed timeline showing the pattern of exclusion and manipulation stretching back years. "I'm not sure what I'm going to do with all this," I admitted to Barbara after we'd organized the evidence. "It feels petty somehow." "It's not petty to defend your character and your place in your grandson's life," Barbara insisted. "You may never need to use this information, but if there ever comes a time when the truth needs to be shown, you'll be prepared." As Tyler's high school years progressed, he continued to excel academically while developing a passion for both robotics and cross-country running. I attended every competition and meet I knew about sitting quietly in the back or on the far side of the field. Tyler always found me afterward breaking away from his parents to give me a quick hug or chat briefly about his performance. During his junior year, college discussions began in earnest. Melanie pushed relentlessly for her alma mater, an exclusive East Coast university. James seconded this choice, emphasizing the alumni connections that would benefit Tyler's future career. Tyler confided his true feelings during one of our now rare private conversations. "I don't want to go there, Grandma. The engineering program at State University is actually better and it's closer to home." "To both homes," he added, squeezing my hand. When Tyler ultimately chose State University over Melanie's preference, announcing his decision at a family dinner I wasn't invited to, the resulting argument was apparently explosive. Tyler texted me afterwards. "Mom freaked out when I said I picked State, said I was throwing away opportunities and connections. Dad backed her up. Why can't they just be happy for me?" I responded with care. "They have certain dreams for you, honey. It takes time to adjust when those dreams need to change. Give them space to accept your choice. I'm proud of you for making the decision that feels right for you." What I didn't say was how vindicated I felt that Tyler had chosen a path independent of Melanie's controlling influence. It felt like the first crack in her perfect facade, the first time her narrative hadn't prevailed. It was a small victory in a long war I hadn't chosen to fight. The invitation to Tyler's graduation ceremony arrived by mail, formal printed with no personal note. I knew I would be seated with the general audience, not with the family. I knew there would be no acknowledgement of my role in Tyler's life. Still, nothing could have kept me away. The day was bright and beautiful, the high school football field transformed with rows of white chairs and a flower-bedecked stage. I arrived early, wanting to secure a good view despite my distant seating. As I expected, I was placed in the general section, while Melanie James and the entire Harrington clan occupied a reserved front row. What I didn't expect was Tyler's speech. As valedictorian, he had the honor of addressing his graduating class. He spoke eloquently about resilience, about overcoming obstacles, about defining success on your own terms. And then, to my shock, he mentioned me by name. "My grandmother Georgia taught me something important," he said, his young voice clear in the spring air. "She showed me that dignity isn't about what you have or where you come from. It's about how you treat others, especially when it's difficult. It's about staying true to yourself when it would be easier to give in or give up. Her quiet strength has inspired me more than she knows." From my seat, I could see Melanie's back stiffen. Even from a distance, her displeasure was palpable. James placed a restraining hand on her arm. I sat very still, tears streaming unchecked down my face. After the ceremony, Tyler found me in the crowd. He hugged me tightly, whispering, "I meant every word, Grandma." Before Melanie could intervene, he added quickly, "We're having dinner at the Capitol Grill tonight at 7. Mom and Dad said to invite you. Table's under Dad's name." I was stunned. In 18 years, I had never been invited to join one of their private family celebrations. Tyler must have pushed hard for my inclusion, and for some reason Melanie had relented. Perhaps she didn't want to appear petty on his special day. Perhaps she thought she could control the situation in a public setting. I spent the afternoon in careful preparation. I selected a classic navy dress, simple but elegant. I had my hair styled at the local salon. I purchased a tasteful graduation gift and had it professionally wrapped. I even practiced calm responses to potential provocations, determined not to let Melanie's inevitable jabs ruin Tyler's evening. The Capitol Grill was the most upscale restaurant in our area, all dark wood paneling and white tablecloths. I arrived precisely at 7, butterflies dancing in my stomach. The hostess led me to a round table where James, Melanie, and Tyler were already seated. Melanie's parents were conspicuously absent. "Where are the Harringtons?" I asked, as I took the seat farthest from Melanie, the only empty chair. "Mom's parents had a conflict," Tyler explained, though his expression suggested this was news to him as well. "It's just us tonight." Melanie wore a fixed smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was dressed impeccably as always, diamonds glittering at her ears and throat. "Georgia, how nice you could join us." James looked uncomfortable, his gaze darting between his wife and mother. "Congratulations again, Tyler," he said clearly, trying to direct conversation to safe territory. "We're so proud of you." The evening proceeded with tense politeness through appetizers. Tyler carried most of the conversation, talking excitedly about university housing and course registration. I responded enthusiastically, while Melanie sipped her martini in cold silence, occasionally checking her phone with exaggerated sighs. Midway through the main course, I noticed the restaurant manager watching our table with unusual interest. He spoke briefly to a waiter who nodded and positioned himself near our section. Something about their manner struck me as prepared expectant. I felt a flutter of nervousness, wondering if Melanie had planned some public humiliation. As dessert menus were distributed, Tyler made an announcement. "I've decided on my major," he said, looking directly at me. "I'm going to study civil engineering." My heart swelled. Civil engineering had been Mark's profession before his accident. Tyler had never known his grandfather, but he was honoring him nonetheless. "Civil engineering." Melanie's voice cut through my emotion. "We discussed this, Tyler. Business or pre-law makes much more sense with your aptitudes and connections." "Engineering feels right to me, Mom," Tyler replied steadily. "Grandma Georgia has told me so much about Grandpa's work. It sounds meaningful, building things that help communities." Melanie's eyes flashed to me, narrowing dangerously. "Of course, Georgia's influence again. How convenient that you've never mentioned this interest before today." "I've been considering it for months," Tyler said. "Grandma didn't pressure me at all. She just answered my questions about Grandpa." I excused myself to the restroom, needing a moment to collect myself before the situation escalated further. In the hallway, I quietly confirmed arrangements with the restaurant manager, who nodded discreetly. When I returned to the table, I felt strangely calm, fortified by the knowledge that I was prepared for whatever came next. Melanie had clearly used my absence to continue berating Tyler's choice. His face was flushed with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. James was attempting to mediate, his voice low and placating. "It's Tyler's decision, Mel," he was saying as I retook my seat. "We should support what makes him happy." "Support throwing away his potential on some nostalgic fantasy," Melanie hissed, her composure cracking. She'd had at least one more martini during my brief absence. "Support him choosing dirty construction sites over boardrooms because your mother has filled his head with romanticized stories." "That's not fair," Tyler protested. "This is about what I want, not what Grandma wants." Melanie's gaze swung to me, her eyes glittering with unchecked fury. The moment I'd anticipated for years had finally arrived. She was about to show her true self, not just to me, but to Tyler and James as well. "This is all you're doing," she said, her voice rising. "You've never accepted your place. Always pushing, always trying to insert yourself where you don't belong." Other diners were beginning to stare. James placed a warning hand on Melanie's arm, which she shook off violently. 18 years I've tolerated you," she continued, color high in her cheeks. 18 years of your cheap clothes and your cheap sentiment, your pathetic attempts to buy Tyler's affection with gifts and stories." "Melanie, that's enough," James said sharply, but she was past restraint now. "You embarrass me," she spat, leaning across the table toward me. "I'm disgusted by you, by your clingy, manipulative presence in our lives, by your sad, lonely existence that you try to fill by stealing my son's affection." The restaurant had fallen silent, all eyes on our table. Tyler looked horrified, James mortified. I remained perfectly calm, meeting Melanie's venomous gaze steadily. "Are you finished?" I asked quietly. "Not even close," she snarled. I smiled slightly and raised my hand, catching the eye of the waiter who had been hovering nearby. He nodded and moved quickly to the bar area. "What are you doing?" Melanie demanded. "Something I should have done years ago," I replied. "Showing everyone exactly who you are." The large television screens mounted around the restaurant's bar area, normally used for sporting events, suddenly flickered to life. The dinner patrons turned in confusion, then in growing interest as images appeared. It was Melanie at Tyler's 16th birthday party, speaking in low tones to her sister. "The woman's mentally unstable, you know. Calls constantly, demands attention." And then Melanie again at a school function, speaking sweetly to my face. "What a lovely brooch, Georgia. So, vintage." Followed immediately by footage of her turning to a friend the moment I walked away. "God, did you see that tacky costume jewelry? So pathetic." Split-screen footage showed Melanie posting glowing tributes to family on social media, alongside text messages sent the same day describing me as James's embarrassing mother, who, thank God, isn't in any of the photos. There was Melanie telling James that I had declined an invitation to Thanksgiving dinner, followed by her deleted email showing no invitation had ever been sent. On and on it went, a damning compilation of two-faced behavior spanning years. Melanie's face drained of color as her public persona disintegrated before a restaurant full of witnesses. She lunged for her purse, presumably for her phone, but the evidence continued to play. "Turn it off," she hissed at me. "Turn it off now." "I can't," I said truthfully. "The management has control of their own systems." "What is this?" James asked, his voice hollow with shock. "Melanie, what am I watching?" "Lies," she snapped. "Edited footage. Your mother's pathetic attempt to make me look bad." "That's your voice," Tyler said quietly. "Those are your exact words, Mom. I remember some of these conversations." The final clip showed Melanie at a recent school awards ceremony speaking to another mother. "We try to limit Georgia's influence. She's not really the kind of role model we want for Tyler. No education beyond community college, no real cultural awareness. James married down, but that doesn't mean Tyler has to be dragged down too." When the screens finally went dark, the silence in the restaurant was absolute. Then slowly murmurs began. A woman at a nearby table met my eyes and nodded in solidarity. An elderly man at the bar gave me a discreet thumbs up. "How dare you!" Melanie whispered, her voice shaking with rage. "How dare you humiliate me like this?" "I didn't want to do this," I said truthfully. "For 18 years I've swallowed your insults, accepted your exclusions, made excuses for your cruelty. I did it for Tyler's sake, for James's sake, but I won't be the villain in your story anymore, Melanie. Not when I have the truth on my side." James was staring at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. "All these years," he said slowly. "All these times you told me Mom was making things difficult, being demanding, misunderstanding your intentions." "James, you can't possibly believe," Melanie began, but he cut her off. "I heard you, in your own words, talking about my mother like she's nothing, after everything she sacrificed for me." Melanie's strategy shifted instantly. Tears filled her eyes, her posture softening into vulnerability. "I've been under so much pressure," she said. "You know how hard I work to make everything perfect for our family. Georgia has never appreciated the standards we maintain, the social position we've built." "Stop it, Mom," Tyler said, his young face hard with disillusionment. "Just stop. I've seen how you treat Grandma for years. I've watched you exclude her, belittle her, lie about her. I just didn't know how deliberate it was until now." Melanie stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I will not sit here and be attacked by my own family. James, we're leaving. Now." James hesitated, torn between decades of acquiescence and the undeniable evidence of his wife's behavior. Go if you need to, I told him gently. This wasn't meant to force you to choose sides. It was just time for the truth to be known. After a moment's agonized indecision, James stood. Tyler, he asked, looking at his son. I'm staying with Grandma, Tyler said firmly. We have things to talk about. Melanie stormed toward the exit, James following more slowly, after placing enough cash on the table to cover the bill. As they left, other diners watched in silent judgment. A few nodded to me in support or understanding. When they were gone, Tyler moved to the chair beside me. I had no idea it was that bad, he said quietly. I mean, I knew she was often unkind to you, but the deliberate lies, the manipulation. I'm sorry you had to see that, I told him, squeezing his hand. I never wanted to come between you and your parents. You didn't, he assured me. She did, with every lie every time she tried to push you out of my life. The restaurant manager approached our table. Mrs. Wilson, is everything all right? Can I get you and your grandson anything else? We're fine now, I said. Thank you for your help with the presentation. When he'd gone, Tyler looked at me curiously. How did you arrange all that? The videos, the timing. I've had help, I admitted. My friend Barbara is quite tech-savvy. We've been documenting your mother's behavior for a few years now, originally just for my own sanity to confirm I wasn't imagining things. I reserved this restaurant's private room with AV capabilities weeks ago, just in case an opportunity arose to finally set the record straight. When your mother invited me tonight, it felt like fate. Tyler shook his head in amazement. Grandma Georgia, the secret strategist. I had no idea. For the first time that evening, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. There's a lot about me your mother never bothered to discover. The fallout from the graduation dinner was swift and dramatic. My phone began ringing at 6 a.m. the next morning. James, his voice ragged with emotion. How long, he demanded without preamble, how long have you been collecting evidence against Melanie? That's what concerns you, I asked quietly, not the content of that evidence. There was a long pause. I don't know what to think anymore, Mom. The woman in those videos? That's not the Melanie I thought I knew. It's the Melanie I've known for 18 years, I replied. I started documenting her behavior after Tyler's 16th birthday, when I overheard her telling people I was mentally unstable. James exhaled shakily. Why didn't you ever say anything? I tried, James, many times. You either didn't believe me or made excuses for her. Eventually, I realized words weren't enough. I needed proof. So you orchestrated a public humiliation. I created a backup plan in case it became necessary, I corrected. Your wife's public behavior last night made it necessary. James was silent for several moments. Tyler didn't come home last night, he finally said. Where is he? He stayed in my guest room, I confirmed. He was too upset to face Melanie. He's still sleeping now. Mel is not doing well, James admitted. She's alternating between rage and tears. Insists you've manipulated the footage, taken things out of context. Says you've been trying to turn Tyler against her for years. Everything I showed was unedited and in full context, I said firmly. As for turning Tyler against her, I've done the opposite. I've never criticized Melanie to Tyler, never tried to damage their relationship. Ask him yourself. I don't know what to believe anymore, James said, his voice breaking slightly. My whole life feels like a lie. My heart ached for my son caught between his mother and the woman he'd built his life around. I'm sorry, James. I never wanted to hurt you. I know, he said softly. That's the worst part. You've always put me first even when I didn't do the same for you. After we hung up, I made breakfast for Tyler, who emerged from the guest room looking rumpled but resolute. Dad called. He asked, accepting a cup of coffee. I nodded. He's confused, hurt, trying to make sense of everything. Did he defend her? Not exactly, I said carefully. He's processing a lot right now. Try not to judge him too harshly, Tyler. He's been under Melanie's influence for a very long time. Tyler's expression softened. You're defending him even now, after how he's treated you. He's my son, I said simply. Just as you're his son. Family is complicated, but love doesn't have to be. Over the next week, our unusual living arrangement continued. Tyler stayed with me, needing space from the tense atmosphere at his parents' home. James called daily, his perspective gradually shifting as he reviewed the evidence I shared with him, years of documentation showing Melanie's systematic campaign against me. Melanie predictably refused any accountability. She left angry voicemails accusing me of destroying her family. She sent lengthy emails to Tyler filled with revisionist history and emotional manipulation. When these tactics failed, she showed up at my front door unannounced, demanding to speak with her son. I stood firmly in the doorway. "Tyler doesn't want to see you right now, Melanie. He needs time." "You've poisoned him against me," she hissed, perfectly manicured finger jabbing the air between us. "After everything I've done for him, all the advantages I've given him that you never could." "Material advantages aren't everything," I replied calmly. "Tyler values honesty, respect, and genuine love. When you're ready to offer those things, I'm sure he'll be willing to talk." She left in a fury, tires screeching, as she pulled away. Later that day, James called to apologize for her behavior. "I've suggested counseling," he said wearily. "Both couples and individual. She refuses." "And what about you?" I asked gently. "I'm seeing someone next week," he admitted. "I need to understand how I became so blind to what was happening, how I failed to protect you." The conversation gave me hope that something positive might emerge from this painful situation, that James might finally recognize his own role in enabling Melanie's behavior over the years. As weeks passed and college preparations began, practical matters demanded attention. Tyler would need to register for classes, secure housing purchase supplies. Typically, these tasks would involve both parents, but the current family fracture complicated everything. "I'd like Grandma to come with me to orientation," Tyler announced during an uncomfortable family dinner at a neutral restaurant, our first attempt at civility since the graduation night revelation. Melanie's face tightened. "That's a parent activity, Tyler. Your father and I have already booked our hotel." "Actually, each student can bring up to 3 guests," Tyler countered, clearly having researched this point. "Dad, you're coming for sure. Mom, you can come too if you want, but Grandma is definitely coming." James placed a restraining hand on Melanie's arm before she could respond. "That sounds reasonable," he said with newfound firmness. "Mom was a teacher for decades. She might have valuable insights." Melanie's expression was thunderous, but she recognized a losing battle. "Fine," she snapped. "Let's all play happy family for the college administrators. Whatever Tyler wants." "This isn't about what I want," Tyler said, his young face serious beyond his years. "It's about what's right. Grandma deserves to be included. She always has." I felt a surge of pride at my grandson's moral clarity. Even in this difficult situation, he was holding fast to principles of fairness and respect. Somehow, despite the toxic dynamics he'd been raised in, Tyler had developed a strong ethical compass and the courage to follow it. A tentative plan emerged. James and Melanie would drive separately from me to the university. We would attend orientation events as civilly as possible. Tyler would split his time between us, ensuring no one felt excluded. It was an imperfect solution to an imperfect situation, but it represented progress. As we were leaving the restaurant, James hung back to speak with me privately. "I've been going through old photo albums," he said, "looking at pictures from when I was growing up, trying to remember what it was like before." "Before Melanie," I finished when he trailed off. He nodded. "You were an amazing mother. Are an amazing mother. I forgot that somehow, or let myself be convinced otherwise." "We all make mistakes, James," I said gently. "This was more than a mistake," he insisted. "It was a betrayal of everything you did for me, everything you sacrificed." His eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Mom." I hugged him then, for the first time in years. He felt simultaneously familiar and like a stranger in my arms. "It's not too late," I whispered. "For us, at least." He pulled back, wiping his eyes. "Melanie gave me an ultimatum last night, said I need to choose between her and having you in our lives." My heart sank. "James, I would never want to break up your marriage." "That's not your doing," he said firmly. "That's her inability to accept that she's been wrong, to acknowledge the hurt she's caused." "What will you do?" I asked, afraid of the answer. He looked toward the parking lot where Melanie waited impatiently by their luxury SUV. I don't know yet, but I know I can't keep pretending everything is fine. Not anymore. As they drove away, Tyler lingered with me. Dad's different now, he observed, standing up to Mom, thinking for himself. People can change when confronted with truth they can't ignore, I said. Sometimes it takes a shock to break old patterns. Tyler smiled slightly. Like a video on restaurant TVs. I laughed despite myself. That wasn't my proudest moment, Tyler. Maybe not, he acknowledged, but it was necessary. And pretty badass, Grandma, just saying. I drove home that night feeling cautiously optimistic. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with uncomfortable conversations and painful realizations. But for the first time in 18 years, truth was out in the open. No more pretending, no more gaslighting, no more silent suffering. Whatever happened next, it would be based on reality, not Melanie's carefully constructed illusions. And that, I decided, was something worth celebrating. 1 year after the graduation dinner that changed everything, I stood in my kitchen preparing a small celebration. Tyler had completed his freshman year at State University with excellent grades and was coming home for summer break. Home to my house where he'd chosen to live during school holidays, despite the ongoing family tension. So much had changed in those 12 months. After Melanie's ultimatum failed to produce her desired result, she'd escalated her campaign against me. She hired a lawyer, claimed emotional distress, threatened lawsuits over the recorded videos. When James refused to support these tactics, she filed for separation, certain he would come crawling back rather than risk losing her family's connections and financial support. She miscalculated badly. James, once awakened to the manipulation he'd enabled for decades, couldn't return to willing blindness. He moved into an apartment, began intensive therapy, and gradually rebuilt his relationship with me through honest conversations about our painful past. I let her reshape my memories, he admitted during one particularly emotional discussion. Let her convince me that you were controlling when you were actually supportive, that your sacrifices were manipulations, that your love was a burden. Why? I asked the question that had haunted me for years. Why was it so easy for her to turn you against me? James considered this carefully. Partly her skill at manipulation, partly my own insecurities. I was from a modest background, suddenly in a world of wealth and privilege through Melanie. I think I wanted to distance myself from anything that reminded me of where I came from, including you. His honesty hurt, but also healed. For the first time in decades, we were speaking truth to each other. Melanie filed for divorce when it became clear her strategy had backfired. She demanded primary custody of Tyler, despite him being 18 and legally an adult. She claimed my negative influence had damaged both her marriage and her relationship with her son. The judge was unimpressed, especially when Tyler testified about the years of witnessing his grandmother's mistreatment. The divorce was finalized in early spring. James emerged from it with less money, but greater clarity. Worth every penny, he told me with a wry smile. Freedom isn't cheap. Tyler thrived at university, throwing himself into his engineering courses with enthusiasm. He joined the robotics club, made new friends, and even started dating a kind-hearted biology major named Emma. During weekend visits and video calls, I watched him blossom away from Melanie's controlling influence. Melanie herself remained unrepentant. She moved back east to her family's community, took a high-profile position at her father's firm, and crafted a narrative of victimhood that some in her social circle accepted unquestioningly. She maintained limited formal contact with Tyler, their relationship civil but strained. With James and me, she communicated only through lawyers when necessary. As I prepared Tyler's favorite lasagna for his homecoming dinner, I reflected on the unexpected blessings that had emerged from last year's painful confrontation. My relationship with James, once so damaged, was healing through honesty and shared determination. My bond with Tyler, always strong despite Melanie's interference, had deepened into adult friendship built on mutual respect and genuine affection. Most surprisingly, I had discovered a new phase of life I'd never anticipated. In my mid-60s, I'd found fresh purpose supporting other grandparents facing family estrangement. What began as an informal support group meeting in my living room had evolved into a structured program with professional family therapists occasionally participating. Through sharing my experience, I helped others navigate similar painful situations with dignity and hope. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel and hurried to answer, expecting Tyler. Instead, I found James standing on my porch, looking nervous but determined. "Is everything okay?" I asked, immediately concerned. "Tyler's not due for another hour." "Everything's fine," he assured me. "I came early because I wanted to talk to you privately before he arrives." He held up a worn photo album I recognized from his childhood. "I found some things I thought we should share with Tyler tonight, if that's okay with you." Over coffee at my kitchen table, James showed me what he'd discovered, photographs of his father that he'd forgotten existed. Mark at their wedding, young and handsome in his rented tuxedo. Mark holding baby James with awestruck pride. Mark on the construction site pointing out building features to toddler James perched on his shoulders. "Melanie kept these albums boxed up in the attic," James explained. "Said they didn't match the decor of our home. I never pushed back, never insisted they be displayed or even accessible." "Another way of erasing your past," I observed quietly. "Erasing me." James nodded, his expression pained. "Tyler should know his grandfather, not just through your stories, but through these images too. He should understand where he comes from, both sides of his heritage." When Tyler arrived, bursting through the door with all the energy of a college freshman on summer break, we greeted him with hugs and the photo album spread across the coffee table. "What's all this?" he asked, dropping his backpack. "Your history," James said simply. "The part that's been kept from you." For the next hour, the three of us pored over photographs, sharing stories and memories. I watched Tyler's face as he studied images of the grandfather he'd never known, the man whose profession he'd chosen to follow. I saw him recognize his own features in his father's childhood photos. I witnessed the quiet satisfaction as he placed himself within a lineage that extended beyond Melanie's carefully curated family narrative. "This is why Mom hated you so much, isn't it?" Tyler asked, suddenly looking up at me. "Because you represented a past Dad had before her, a life she couldn't control or reshape." "That's part of it," I agreed. "But it's also about class, about different values and backgrounds. Your mother comes from privilege and social position. I represent something else entirely." "Something real," Tyler said with conviction. "Something genuine." Later, as we enjoyed lasagna and laughter around my modest dining table, I felt a profound sense of rightness, of pieces finally falling into their proper places. The family configuration wasn't what I'd envisioned when James was growing up or when Tyler was born, but it was authentic, built on truth, rather than pretense, on mutual respect, rather than fear and manipulation. There would always be rough edges to navigate. Melanie remained Tyler's mother, a permanent if distant part of our family constellation. James still carried guilt about his years of complicity. I sometimes struggled with lingering hurt from nearly 2 decades of exclusion and gaslighting. But we were healing, individually and collectively. We were creating new traditions based on inclusion rather than exclusion. We were learning that family isn't defined by perfect harmony, but by the willingness to work through discord with honesty and love. As I looked at my son and grandson across the table, I felt immense gratitude for this unexpected late-life gift, the restoration of relationships I'd feared were permanently damaged. The vindication was sweet, yes, but the renewal of genuine connection was infinitely sweeter. "You know what I've learned from all this?" I said as we finished dessert. "Sometimes standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary, not just for your own dignity, but for the health of relationships that matter." "I wish I'd learned that lesson earlier," James said ruefully. "I'm just glad we finally got here," Tyler added, his young face serious. "Better late than never, right? Better late than never indeed." If you've ever faced family estrangement or had to stand up to someone who was undermining you, I hope my story gives you courage. Sometimes the hardest battles are fought at the family dinner table, but they're worth fighting when truth and dignity are at stake. Have you experienced similar family conflicts? What helped you navigate them? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe to hear more real-life experiences, and share with someone who might need to know they're not alone in their family struggles. Thank you for listening to my story. May it help you find the strength to write your own.